Morning, it's Will from Will's Kicks YouTube channel. Glad you're here with me this morning because I have three little devils that I'm dealing with here on the compound, as we call it. Before I get going into today's video, I'd love for you to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. I will reply, and join with me as we go over here and we meet the devils. A couple of years ago here on the farm we had several milking goats. In fact, my biggest herd was, I think, 23 goats. It was pretty exciting. I milked several of them until we finally got a milk cow, but the wife and kids talked me into getting 3 more goats because I have a pasture here over, and let me tell you how weedy that sucker gets. And so we decided to get some weed eaters, and here are the weed eaters right here. The goats are fun. They're cute, and they like to climb on you and try to scratch up your back. They're a nightmare to take care of because you still have to trim their hooves, and as winter is approaching, because we're here at September 2nd and winter's right around the corner, and then we're going to have to keep their water unfrozen. Pretty lucky they're so cute. But anyway, we have a problem. And the problem with any goat, and any of you who own a goat or have kept a goat know this, is that the issue you have with goats is the fact that they really do not like staying where they're supposed to stay. And so I have neighbors. I have neighbors over there. I have neighbors over across the highway over there. I have neighbors over there to the south of me. And we have a pretty nice field wire fence that separates us from all of those properties, or at least separates my pasture from all of their properties. But as I'll show you in a little clip a little bit later on how to test a fence to see whether or not it is goat proof, this little field wire fence has not been very goat proof. Mainly because the neighbor, a friend of ours who bought this place, realized that they built the fence all wrong, that the neighbor built the fence. And if you see here, the T-post, the wire is on the wrong side of the neighbor's fence. And so what was happening is he was having a bull that really didn't want to stay caged in his pasture, and always, you know, the grass is always greener on the other side. And so the bull managed to come over here and to take all of that field wire fence and peel it up so that he could break into our pasture. And now as the pastures got boring for goats, because that's what happens, goats get bored, they decided that they needed to go explore the neighbors. And so today's project, we're going to be fixing a fence and making it goat proof. Stay tuned. How to test whether or not a fence is goat proof. The only thing you need is a 5-gallon bucket of water and a fence. Watch and learn. If the water can get through, so can a goat. While it might be a slight exaggeration that a goat can escape from any fence that you can get a 5-gallon bucket of water through, not by much, as anybody who has a goat will attest. But there are some things that can keep a goat in. One is having adequate food and water in the pasture itself, so they don't have a real desire to have to leave your pasture. But the other part is the fence, the integrity of the fence itself, and then also running some juice, running some electricity through that fence. Years ago, when my pasture was in a lot better shape and the fence was brand new, I had 4 strands of non-barbed wire, all electrified, running around the entire pasture along with all of the field wire, and nothing could get out of that thing. And so, but years of neglect, and guess what? Fences break just like anything else. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to fix the existing field wire that's down there. I'm sure my neighbor eventually is going to want to take all of his fencing and put it on the other side of that T-post like we looked at just a little bit ago. But I'm going to go ahead and secure it as is right now so the goats stop getting into his pasture and stop going across the highway to the other neighbor's house. We're going to go ahead and shore up the integrity of the field wire, but then on top of that, we're gonna get this little beauty turned on. That right there is a really cheap, well, it's not the most powerful electric fencer in the world, but it'll sure put a shock through a goat and form that psychological barrier that you're really looking for with a goat fence. The big secret to having a good fencer is not necessarily the amount of power that the fencer's shooting out, but how good your ground is. And we got a really good ground here. We got galvanized pipe that runs, I don't know, 150 feet under the ground. So we got a 150-foot grounding rod, along with grounding it to the fence itself. If you Google or look up other electric fencing tips, you'll see other things where they take the electric wire and they alternate it, ground hot. And so if they're leaning up against it, they'll hit that ground and hot, and it's not necessarily depending on the electricity flowing through their hooves and into the ground, because if the ground is really dry, it doesn't really shock them all that well. But first things first, we got to shore up this field wire. And so what I got for that is simply I got my belt with a pair of linesman pliers. I can't find my fencing pliers. I have several pairs, but I also have 3 boys, which means that I never have the tools that I need when I need them. Just some regular needle nose pliers, a belt. I got a ton of insulators for when we run that fence, along with some old clips for that field wire. I have a bunch of these clips new, but what I like to use instead is some just some old discarded scrap electric fence wire, because it's nice and flexible and really easy to get around that field wire to tie it to a T-post. And then this beauty, the wire stretcher. We'll be using that when we hook up the electric fence. So why don't you join me as we do some grunt work, put on the sunglasses on this bright and shiny day, and get to business.
I can't forget the day we met. Your eyes so blue, me piercing through. I can't forget the day we met. Your smile so bright, it made me swoon. Our love is like a summer's day, hot and endless in a magic way. Whenever I see you, all I can think is my summer love. Been waiting for you, my love. My summer love. Been waiting for you, my love. I can't forget the day we met. You looked so fly in your red Corvette. Your hair, your look, your everything. When I see it all, I knew that.
You know, one of the tricks to field wire is when a cow or a horse or some kind of animal or a tree falls on the field wire fence, it ends up taking these lateral wires and bending them over. And unlike a single strand, it's just, I mean, it's going to stay that way. And so the trick to fixing it is just, you have to go and straighten every single wire out. And they typically hello, cat. They typically can slide over, but you're gonna have to take it and bend it and then move it back to where it goes. So there's no really faster way to do it that I know of, other than just going through the entire fence and little by little pushing these vertical wires up, and then truck your way through. And then, you know, it doesn't take too long. And then before you know it, it almost looks like a tree, a goat, or a cow did not lean over on your field wire. So I got this section of field wire pretty much shored up, at least as good as it's getting, without putting in additional T-posts and whatnot to be able to get that bottom from continuing to flap up. And so on this section, and for this video, instead of having you go all around the entire pasture with me, I'm gonna just focus on this section right here for you. Hopefully you can get something out of it. And so now that this is shored up, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and get the electric fence. I'm gonna probably just do 2 strands, one high enough off the ground that if they try to go under it, then they'll get they'll get hit, and one, you know, I don't know, a couple feet, 18, 20 inches above that. So what I do, the nice thing about running that barbless wire is that, one, it doesn't cut you up because barbed wire is terrible. But when it comes to electric wire, you don't need to put so many stinking fence posts in. As long as you got good corner posts that can hold a lot of tension. This twisted barbless wire that I have over here is really not going anywhere. And these T-posts can be, shoot, 30 feet apart from one another. It really saves a lot of money, and that's one of the reasons electric fences are so nice, is because with the exception of having to hook them up to power, they're a really cheap fence to build, and really effective, especially if your animals have got hit a couple times, so they know to stay away from it. And then you don't need to worry about them leaning over it like they do on field wire, because it just works. It works so well. It's not necessarily as the physical barrier as much as it is the psychological. And so what we need to do here today is have that physical barrier built like we talked about earlier, but then get the psychological barrier up so those goats don't even want to go near that field wire, and the electric fence can just be the big deterrent. So this is my T-post right here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take these insulators. All they do to pop off is they're shaped just like this. So what you do is you put this end around the T-post first, and then you wrap this around to lock it in. So I'm going to go take all off. There used to be 4 on here, like I was telling you. There was 4 wires all wrapped all around this place. So I'm going to be able to save one of them. And the first one I'm going to put up about yay high, kind of where one of these insulators was. So all I'm going to do is put it around the T-post, and it clicks in, and then this piece goes right around the spine of the T-post. See, and this is how it's supposed to look. You want this facing in towards your pasture for it to work right. And then next one we'll put up about here or so. Again, taking it around, locking it around the spine, and clicking it over. And then we're going to have 2 nice wires that are up low enough to where actually I'm going to put this one down one more. Low enough to where they can't really crawl under it, but high enough to where they can't get in between the 2 of them. You know, depending on your situation, depending on what kind of foliage, oh, there's a dove. Depending on what kind of stuff you got growing in your pasture, you're probably going to need to get one of these. I have, here in Idaho, south central Idaho, we have a lot of Russian olives, which are an invasive species, but originally planted here as forage food for birds like pheasants. I really like them, but they do have some pretty significant thorns on them, you know, a couple inches long. And one time I used one as a toothpick and didn't realize that there's a little bit of, I don't know, poison or something on the end of it. My gums went numb. So I don't know, I guess put that in my back pocket when I have a toothache out in the wild. So anyway, these Fiskars pruners, stinking amazing. I love all these Fiskars products, and this thing is really handy when it comes to trimming out a Russian olive tree or any sort of tree or large vegetation that my weed eater can't get to. And when you are running an electric fence, it's really important to understand that you can't have anything shorten this thing out, which means that you can't have, if you got limbs falling on it, like this thing was falling on it just like this, if that's going, it's going to short it out, and then it's going to lose its effectiveness. The same thing like down below, and I'll have a shot of me doing this, but I have my weed eater, and that's why I have my ear protection on here. But any of this grass growing up and touching this will short it out, and it gets especially bad if it's raining or there's some precipitation out that really makes that electrical connection even more solid. And so do yourself a favor. If you're putting in an electric fence, make sure nothing is touching your electric fence or is getting in the way of the power going straight to the animals that it is intended to shock. So, here we go.
I can't forget the day we met. Your eyes so blue, me piercing through. I can't forget the day we met. Your smile so bright, it made me swoon. Our love is like a summer's day, hot and endless in a magic way. Whenever I see you, all I can think is my summer love. Been waiting for you, my love. My summer love. Been waiting for you, my love. I can't forget the day we met. You looked so fly in your red Corvette. Your hair, your look, your everything. When I see it all, I knew that you were mine. I'm in love with your hair, your lips, your silhouette in the moonlight shine. With my love, you won't ever be alone. My summer love, been waiting for you, my love. Completely a fool, been waiting for you, my love. Head over heels, I'm blinded by what I feel. My love is forever yours.
Oh, isn't that satisfying? Some of the jungle a second ago is nice and cleaned out. You can see that as soon as I pull that, all those weeds and debris off of this wire, this can be nice and free to collect or to conduct some good electricity to keep my goats in. I got to do a shout out to this. I've gone through a lot of weed eaters before. I've done battery powered, several gas powered, several different brands. But they kept falling apart on me, and the weeds would get wrapped around the head really bad, and you might have seen that over there. But the only reason that is because I have old alfalfa that's never been cut this year, and it just streams out, so it's like weed eating vines. But only I think once or twice did I have to actually pull the weeds, unwind the weeds around the head. This head actually spins the weeds that it gets wrapped up around pretty easily, and I've been nothing but impressed with this. It's a Echo SRM 225. I did a lot of research before I bought this thing, and definitely the best money I've ever spent. If they still make it, I'll put a link down in the description so you guys can go and get yourself the best weed eater you've ever had. Onward. All right, so looks like we got most of this fence line cleared away like we talked about. You notice I'm wearing a different shirt. Normally I never weed eat in a short sleeve shirt, and it's because it hurts. So wouldn't put on this long sleeve shirt. Thrift store dress shirts are the best work shirts on the planet. Maybe I'll do a video on that someday. Not that you need one on that. So the part we're at right now is we had really rednecked a fence back here in our back corner because these goats were able to climb up on this old fallen down tree here and just jump right over the fence. And so we had to do some creative fence architecture. And anyway, so these white grids you see back here, you're never going to be able to buy them. They're actually old store fixtures from a store I used to work at years and years ago. But what I want to show here is just kind of how I connect this hot wire right here. This is going over that little fencer that I showed you a little earlier, and how I connect it. So this is this dirty way of doing it, and the reason I'm doing it kind of dirty is because you know, the neighbor is going to be playing with this fence again, and I don't want to have to redo a bunch of stuff. I'd rather just be able to take it off his fence when we, and I'll probably help him get it all figured out, and then get something more permanent set up in this corner right here. Anyway, you're going to see right here I have this is the hot wire that's going to an insulator, and this little insulator, you see it's designed to where the hot wire can wrap around the outside, and then your wire that holds on to the whatever structure you're attaching your fence to goes through the middle, and that way there is no touching between this fence and this wire and your hot wire right here. So right here I have a couple wires, the ones we looked at just a little earlier, and they are attached to the old kind of fence system. And we're going to go ahead and cut this. And later we're going to use a fence stretcher because this is going to loosen it up quite a ways. This is where you need a good set of linesman pliers, or better yet, fencing pliers if your kids didn't steal them. So we're going to knock that back and forth a little here. And hang on for dear life. Oh, there we go. All right. So all you're going to do down here, it's really simple. I'm probably going to hit my tripod when I do it, is that you can see how this was kind of loose in here because it was done in a hurry. But all you need to do is thread it through there and just temporarily lock it down. And then you can take this and wind it up the rest of the way like I'm about to do. I'll do that same thing for the bottom wire. I only have the top wire on this corner because that's all I need, because everything's super solid, as you can see. But I'll definitely need the 2 wires that I hooked up going down this whole north fence of my pasture. So what I'll do is I'll just take this hot wire and I'll run a dropper down and connect this to connect the bottom wire to. And that way it can go from 1 hot wire down to 2 hot wires, just like that. So let's do it. So some of you might have noticed that when I said I was missing my fencing pliers because I have 3 boys and my tools are never around. Why am I doing all the work when I have boys that are perfectly capable of doing the work? Well, one's a full-time employee, still in senior year of high school, but Andrew here is my 11-year-old, and he does good grunt work from time to time, and so I'm going to have him finish getting these parts cleaned up. You remember me telling you how important it is to get that stuff cleaned up from around those insulators, and that's what Andrew's working on right now. And then I'm going to have him come over here and change out a broken insulator. So, all right, so here we are back at the opposite corner from those really heavy-duty locust corner posts that are really going to hold the weight of the tension of this electric fence. Doesn't need to be a lot, just enough to keep it up off the ground, because remember, I mean, we're not worried about animals leaning on it too much because they'll get shocked and we'll get right off. But let's talk about how to use the fence stretcher. And so some parts you're going to need to know is that this little foot right here you can use for butting up against a fence post or any other solid object. Same thing with this side. However, we are not going to be doing that because you can stretch wire on wire using these little clamps here. You can see that they have teeth right here, and then they close up on each wire, and then you have a duplicate one right here that when you pull it back has those teeth on it, and then it pinches the wire. So try to do this in a way that you'll be able to see. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up on this back one. I'm going to put this out, put the wire in there, and then clamp it up nice and tight. Hopefully you can see that. And then with this handle all the way forward, this is going to be able to be pulled out as much as it can. And then if you can see that, we're pulling that out and pinching that wire right there. And you give it a little tension there. Now what we're going to be able to do is just work this thing where it pulls it. Now remember, I had you leave this wire loose. We left this wire loose so that as we pull, that wire will feed up into this loop. Because the fence is so loose, we're actually going to have to do this a couple times. So let's do that. And then remember, you go all the way forward with it. And then we can undo that. Bring that out again. We're going to bring it out nice and far. Close it again. And the process starts all over. Now let's walk on down and check that out. Okay, so we're out here walking the fence again, And what we're doing is we're taking a look at the this top wire here, and you can see that from what it was, it is tightened up quite a bit. So you might remember when we were down by this other corner post on the east, that is where it was the loosest. And so we're just going to make our way down here, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking this wire, and then the whole time we're going to be checking like the insulators and making sure they're still attached to the fence. And occasionally you want to look out for an insulator that kind of maybe got caught in a kink of the wire and needs help releasing, or else it'll pop the insulator right off the fence. But no, this is looking good. This is, if you could see that behind me, it's significantly tighter than it was before, and in fact, it's actually quite taut. So I think we're good. Let's go back up and do the bottom one. All right, so we're back at the corner post, and before we move on to this bottom wire, we got to tie this thing off right here. And so all we're going to do is pull it as tight as we're actually going to do one more pump, and then we're going to pull that through, tighten it down. And there's a lot of extra wire here, which isn't actually usual, but we can go ahead and just tie it around here a couple times just to make sure it doesn't give out on us when we release the pressure off of the fence stretcher. So again, we go that little taps, pull that wire off, push that in, pull that as well. And now we got a nice tight fence. So now let's take a look at the bottom. Now the bottom's a little trickier. Let me show you. What I've done here is this thing is just kind of hanging on this other thing of field wire because I don't have a corner post here. So that means if I try to stretch it, it's going to just pop right off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it off that insulator for right now while I'm doing the initial stretching. And then I'm going to be able to, after it's stretched out enough, I'm going to be able to just push it up and wire it to that insulator, maybe even using one of the round donut type insulators to get it pulled back up against the fence. So here we go. Here we are at that bottom insulator, the bottom wire here on this end. And what we're going to do is we're going to be attaching that fence stretcher to this, which is going to this old fallen down tree, I believe. At least I hope so. And then pulling on it just like we did below. So we got, let's pull this right here, push that down so we get the maximum stretch out of our fence stretcher. Go ahead and attach it up here, close to the wire that's attached already to the one we're wanting to stretch. And then, giving it a good pull. So what we're going to notice is now I can undo that wire and start pulling this thing. Go around it so it holds it in place for releasing it, letting it go there. Pulling it again, and then it again. Yeah, that's feeling pretty tight actually, so
it's looking tight.
I'm actually going to go ahead and just tie it off, because based off what that other one did, it's going to be plenty tight, and especially after we push that wire up against to get it closer to that fence, that'll tighten it up even more. So there we go, good enough. Release the pressure, pop the thing off this fence stretcher off, and then we're done. Okay, well that didn't turn out that bad at all. I'm actually pretty impressed with these little insulators. So you see what I've done is I've taken the back of it and just hooked it around the neighbor's field wire, and then I just wound it up just like it, and it is shooting down there nice and tight. You can almost play a tune on that thing, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. So I wanted to show you one more thing right up here. I had mentioned a little earlier that this wire was the only wire that actually had electricity running through it that's coming from the fencer. And what we were going to do is we were going to take that single wire of electricity and we were going to turn it into 2 wires of electricity. And so what that requires is this little bridge here. So it was just this wire I just tied it up here and then tied it down below here. And what that does is just transfer the electricity down to this one. And now we should have 2 live wires. So all we need to do now is turn on the fencer and have Andrew touch it to see if it's working.
I knew that
All right, it's a moment of truth. Anybody who's ever plugged in an electric fencer knows what this moment feels like. The time where you plug it in and you hear the tick, 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 and then you go and touch a few wires to see if it's working. So let's see here. We have the extension cord. We have the fencer. And we plug it in and what do we hear? Okay, you can't hear that, but I could. It's ticking a little bit. Best way to test an electric fence is taking a stick. It doesn't necessarily need to be pistol grip or looking like a caulking gun or anything, but you simply take a stick and use it to push the wire into something that is ground. And I have a good spot for that right over here. Let's go over and take a look. We should be able to hear it. You might not be able to see it because of the sun, but please, please. Ugh. So that right there is what's real. And what is real is then when you install electric fence, the first time you turn it on, it will never work. And so time to run around and see what the problem is. All right, so like you just saw, fence didn't work the first time. So what we're gonna do, I was gonna go around and just do this without filming it, but hey, I'll take you along for the ride here of trying to find the short on an electric fence. So the trick is I did unplug it, so I can get away with this, but the trick is looking at every, here, pull the fence back in and get that hooked up, Andrew. The problem with this kind of jumbled mess right now is it's just a little harder to look at, especially if you're a perfectionist. It's darn near impossible to look at without getting really stressed out and anxious. But what I'm doing is I'm looking around for things like this where the wire could be touching a stick and taking those out, pulling these off, because all of these, ouch, those are pokey. All of these things have the potential of reducing the amount of voltage that's actually going to go through when you try to short the fence to test it, or when a goat rubs up against it to investigate. So looking all around, oh, I found it. So take a look at that. So right here, the insulator, it's pushing right up. Whoa, it's pushing right up. Andrew's still messing with the fence over there. Did you get it, Andrew?
Not at all.
Okay, just a second. Okay, problem solved. Now we're gonna go back to what I was showing you here. So this insulator right here is kind of protecting it, but you see what happened is the fence fell right off of there. And so I think I might have to reposition this one because nothing is going to fix that. So let's see what we can do. Okay, that's it right there. We got it all fixed up here. It should be good to go. Now we're gonna walk through and check for everything else. There's another good thing to look for is when your hot wires are pointed back like that, you wanna get these all bent back. Same thing over here. You remember when we tightened this down, we had a lot of loose wire on here. And sometimes it's nice poking it out here because then you extended your electric fence way down here. So just making sure that all of these connections are good, that nothing's coming over and either touching this or touching the wires that are holding it on. So we're good there. And then we're gonna bust down this line real quick, See if we can't find anything else.
I can't forget the day we met. Your eyes so blue, me piercing through. I can't forget the day we met. Your smile so bright.
Looking okay. You know, that's something nobody really tells you, is when you're putting together an electric fence, you do a lot of walking back and forth, especially when you're trying to find a short. But you know what? We plugged it in and I hear some magic. And the magic is the sound of sparks shooting off of something, which means two things. One, the fencer's working. And two, we have a really hardcore short, which means there's probably not any other shorts running around here. Oh, and that's where it is. Let's see if I can get you a close look at it. Hope you're able to see that. So all we're going to do is get that off the metal, turn it on again, see if we can get some spark. Well, we have victory here. The shabby insulator job that I tried doing didn't hold, and so I made a slightly less shabby insulator job, but I'm sure it will only hold for a couple days. But I tell you what, you listen to this sound. It's a beautiful sound. Oh yeah, that means that the minute any of these three little devils touches that fence and tries to go over to the neighbor's house, they will be in for a big surprise. So, girls, are you ready to learn what an electric fence feels like? Say yeah. Yeah.